Good evening, America. I'm Rachel Matto, and tonight we begin with breaking news from the Chechen Republic that represents one of the most shocking developments in this war. A strike that has sent shock waves through the Russian military command structure and triggered what sources describe as a frantic emergency phone call from Ramzan Kadyrov directly to Vladimir Putin. Ukrainian forces have successfully targeted and destroyed what Russian commanders considered an untouchable stronghold, a facility in Chechnya that housed critical command infrastructure, elite Kadyrov forces, and weapon systems that Moscow believed were safely beyond the reach of Ukrainian capabilities. Yes, you heard that right, deep inside Russian territory, far from the front lines. In a region that Putin's most loyal enforcer controls with an iron fist, Ukrainian precision strikes have reached targets that Russian planners assured their leadership were completely secure. This is not just another story about Ukrainian long-range capabilities or symbolic attacks against Russian infrastructure. This is a direct assault on the power base of one of Putin's most crucial allies, a strike that demonstrates Ukrainian ability to reach targets that Russian leadership believed were protected by distance, by air defenses, and by the political impossibility of attacking Kadyrov's territory. The facility that was hit served multiple functions for Russian military operations. It was a training center where Chechen fighters received preparation before deployment to Ukraine. It housed ammunition storage for units operating across the southern front. It contained command and control equipment coordinating operations involving Kadyrov forces. And most significantly, it represented the untouchable status that Ramzan Kadyrov has enjoyed throughout this conflict, the perception that his forces and his territory exist in a protected sphere that Ukraine would not dare challenge. Perception Ukrainian strikes destroyed in spectacular fashion. According to multiple sources with access to Russian military communications, the attack involved precision weapons that struck with devastating accuracy, penetrating what Russian forces thought were adequate defenses and creating destruction that could not be hidden from local populations or explained away as accidents. The scale of damage reportedly exceeded what Russian commanders had prepared for, with secondary explosions from stored ammunition causing effects that spread far beyond the initial impact points. And more critically, the casualties included personnel that Kadyrov considers part of his personal military force, fighters whose deaths he must now explain to families in Chechnya and whose loss represents not just a tactical setback but a personal affront to his authority and prestige. What makes this strike truly extraordinary is the intelligence preparation that enabled it. Ukrainian forces did not simply fire weapons toward Chechen territory hoping to hit something valuable. They identified specific facilities, determined when they would contain maximum value targets, planned strike packages that could overcome defensive systems, and executed the attack with timing that suggests detailed knowledge of Russian operations, a level of targeting precision requiring intelligence, networks that penetrate Russian security, surveillance capabilities that track movements and activities in what Moscow considers secure areas, and operational planning that accounts for every variable from weapon performance to Russian response capabilities. Think about what this means for Russian strategic planning. If Ukrainian forces can strike targets in Chechnya with this level of precision and effect, then no location in Western Russia can be considered truly secure from Ukrainian reach. Facilities that house command posts, ammunition depots, training centers, and logistics hubs must now account for the possibility that Ukraine knows their locations, understands their functions, and possesses capabilities to attack them effectively. And the psychological impact cannot be overstated, as Russian military personnel stationed in what they believed were safe areas now understand they remain potential targets. More importantly, the regional leaders like Kadyrov who have supported Putin's war must now confront the reality that their territories and their forces face direct consequences for their participation, and according to sources familiar with the aftermath, Kadyrov's response to the strike was immediate and intense. Within hours of the attack, he placed an emergency call to Putin that multiple sources describe as heated and demanding. The exact contents remain classified, but the general substance has leaked through various channels in ways that paint a disturbing picture of the tensions the strike has created within Russian leadership. Kadyrov reportedly demanded explanations for how Ukrainian forces could penetrate so deep into Russian territory to strike facilities that Moscow had assured him were secure. He questioned why air defense systems failed to intercept Ukrainian weapons. He insisted on immediate retaliation against Ukrainian targets, and most significantly, he raised concerns about whether his continued commitment of Chechen forces to operations in Ukraine remains viable if Russia cannot protect his territory and his personnel from Ukrainian strikes. This was not a routine military coordination call between a regional leader and the president. This was Kadyrov leveraging his unique position as one of Putin's most loyal and valuable allies to demand responses that the Russian military may not be able to provide. The Chechen leader has built his power on a reputation for brutal effectiveness and on his ability to deliver military results that other Russian forces cannot match. Ukrainian strikes that hit him where he lives, that kill his fighters, and destroy his facilities undermine the image of strength and invincibility that forms the foundation of his authority. And he cannot simply accept such attacks without demanding action and without questioning whether Putin's leadership can provide the protection and support that justify his loyalty. Putin's response to this emergency call reportedly attempted to balance several competing imperatives. He needed to reassure Kadyrov that measures would be taken to prevent future strikes. He had to maintain the relationship with an ally whose forces play outsized roles in Russian military operations. He wanted to project confidence that Russia maintains control over the military situation despite this Ukrainian success. And he faced the uncomfortable reality that Russian air defenses, intelligence capabilities, and strategic depth all proved inadequate to prevent Ukraine from striking a target that political considerations made particularly sensitive. The conversation apparently ended without clear resolution of these tensions, with Kadyrov receiving assurances, but remaining dissatisfied with explanations for how the strike succeeded and with commitments regarding prevention of future attacks. The fact that this call occurred at all, that it was urgent enough to require immediate presidential attention, and that its contents have leaked so extensively through Russian channels, all indicate how seriously this strike has disrupted Russian leadership dynamics. In normal circumstances, regional leaders do not place emergency calls to Putin demanding explanations for military setbacks. They receive information through established chains of command and accept official explanations, regardless of their private doubts, and Kadyrov's direct confrontation with Putin over this strike suggests either that he possesses unique privileges that allow such behavior or that the situation has become serious enough that normal protocols no longer apply. Either interpretation reveals vulnerabilities in Russian command structure and decision-making that Ukraine has successfully exploited not just militarily but politically. Lyman was strategically important as a logistics hub, but the Chechen facility represented something far more significant in Russian calculations. It was a symbol of the untouchable status that key supporters of Putin's regime believe they enjoy. It was a demonstration that Russia maintains depth and security in territories far from active combat zones. It was a center of capability that directly supported ongoing military operations, and it was located in a region whose leader wields outsized influence over Russian domestic politics and military operations. Ukrainian planners understood all of these dimensions when they selected this target. They were not simply looking for military value in terms of destroyed equipment or killed personnel. They were seeking to create political and psychological effects that would resonate through Russian leadership and force conversations like the emergency call between Kadyrov and Putin, and the specific facility that was struck apparently served as a central node for organizing and deploying Chechen forces to various sectors of the Ukrainian front. New fighters arrived there for final preparation before heading to combat zones. Veteran units rotated through for rest and refit between deployments. Equipment and ammunition was stored there for distribution to Kadyrov forces operating across southern and eastern Ukraine. Command staff coordinated operations and communicated with both Chechen leadership and Russian military headquarters. Destroying this facility does not simply eliminate one target. It disrupts an entire system of operations that depends on this central node functioning effectively. Kadyrov forces now face challenges in organizing rotations, in distributing supplies, in coordinating operations, and in maintaining the logistical support that enables their combat effectiveness. And beyond the immediate military impact, the strike creates political complications that extend far beyond simple battle damage assessment. Kadyrov must now explain to the families of killed fighters how Ukrainian weapons reached into Chechnya to kill their sons, brothers, and fathers. He must address questions from his own security services about how intelligence failures allowed such precise targeting. He needs to reassure his military commanders that similar strikes will not occur against other facilities, even though he cannot actually provide such guarantees given demonstrated Ukrainian capabilities, and he faces uncomfortable questions about whether his loyalty to Putin and his commitment of Chechen forces to this war serve Chechen interests if the result is Ukrainian strikes against Chechen territory and casualties among Chechen fighters in facilities that were supposed to be secure. The ammunition and equipment losses compound these political challenges with operational problems. Kadyrov forces operating in Ukraine depend on supply chains that run through facilities in Chechnya where material is stored, organized, and distributed. And disrupting these facilities means units in combat zones face shortages of critical supplies. Operations must be scaled back or postponed while alternative supply arrangements are established. The reputation for effectiveness that Kadyrov forces have carefully cultivated suffers when they cannot maintain operational tempo due to logistics failures, and Russian military commanders who coordinate with Kadyrov forces now face uncomfortable questions about reliability and sustainability of units whose support infrastructure has proven vulnerable to Ukrainian strikes. The precision of the Ukrainian strike raises disturbing questions for Russian security services about intelligence penetration, hitting specific facilities in Chechnya with the accuracy that Ukrainian forces demonstrated requires detailed intelligence that goes far beyond publicly available information or satellite imagery. Someone provided Ukraine with precise coordinates, with information about what the facility contained and when it would hold maximum value, with details about defensive systems and their capabilities, and with timing that maximized impact while minimizing chances of interception. This level of intelligence suggests either that Ukrainian services have recruited sources within Russian military or security structures, or that Western intelligence agencies are providing Ukraine with information collected through methods that penetrate deep into Russian operations. And for Russian counterintelligence, this strike represents catastrophic failure. Their primary mission is preventing exactly this type of intelligence compromise. They are supposed to protect sensitive facilities through security measures that detect surveillance and prevent information leakage. They should identify and neutralize intelligence networks before they can provide targeting information that enables strikes. The fact that Ukrainian forces successfully attacked a facility in Chechnya means Russian counterintelligence failed comprehensively at multiple levels. They did not detect whatever surveillance identified the facility as a valuable target. They did not prevent the collection of detailed information about the facility's functions, defenses, and patterns of activity. They did not intercept communications between Ukrainian forces and whatever sources provided this intelligence. And they did not prevent the strike despite presumably having some warning that Ukrainian forces possessed long-range strike capabilities. Kadyrov security services now face questions about their own competence and loyalty. The Chechen Republic operates what amounts to a parallel security structure that answers primarily to Kadyrov rather than to Russian federal agencies, an arrangement that has created tensions for years with Russian security officials resenting Kadyrov's autonomy while Kadyrov insists his services are more effective than federal agencies. The Ukrainian strike validates Russian concerns about security gaps in Chechen structures while simultaneously exposing federal counterintelligence failures. And the finger-pointing and recriminations that follow will further strain relationships between Kadyrov and Russian security agencies, potentially creating exploitable divisions that Ukraine and Western intelligence can leverage for future operations. The intelligence preparation for this strike likely took weeks or months of collection, analysis, planning, and coordination. Ukrainian intelligence officers and their Western partners identified the facility through some combination of signals intelligence, human sources, satellite imagery, and other collection methods. They confirmed its functions and importance through multiple sources and methods. They tracked patterns of activity to determine optimal timing. They assessed defensive systems and identified vulnerabilities that strike packages could exploit. They coordinated with operational planners to develop attack plans that maximize chances of success, and they maintained operational security throughout this entire process to prevent Russian counterintelligence from detecting preparations and reinforcing defenses or relocating key assets. This comprehensive intelligence operation succeeded against a target that Russian services believed they had secured. Putin's power depends on maintaining a coalition of regional leaders, military commanders, oligarchs, and security officials who support his rule and implement his policies. Kadyrov represents a crucial element of this coalition, providing military forces that are loyal, effective, and willing to conduct operations that other Russian units might refuse or execute poorly. The relationship between Putin and Kadyrov has always involved a careful balance. Putin provides Kadyrov with autonomy in Chechnya, with resources to maintain his power, with protection from federal agencies that might otherwise constrain him, and with opportunities to project power beyond Chechen borders. In exchange, Kadyrov provides unwavering public loyalty, deploys fighters to conflicts where Putin needs capable forces, and serves as an enforcer who can be relied upon for tasks requiring brutality and determination. Ukrainian strikes against Chechen facilities threaten this carefully balanced relationship. Kadyrov expects that his loyalty and his contributions entitle him to protection and support from Putin and the Russian state, and when Ukrainian weapons kill his fighters and destroy his facilities, he questions whether the relationship remains beneficial. If Russia cannot protect his territory and his forces, if Putin's war brings destruction to Chechnya rather than glory and resources, then Kadyrov must reconsider the calculations that justify his support for Putin's policies. And the emergency phone call represents an opening demand for Putin to rebalance the relationship to provide something tangible that justifies continued Chechen commitment to a war that now brings direct costs to Kadyrov's power base. Putin faces difficult choices in responding to Kadyrov's demands. He can promise enhanced air defenses for Chechen territory, but such systems are already stretched thin, defending more critical targets, and their effectiveness against Ukrainian strikes remains questionable. He can authorize retaliatory strikes against Ukrainian targets, but this risks escalation and may not satisfy Kadyrov's desire for visible punishment of those responsible. He can offer additional resources or authorities to Kadyrov as compensation, but this creates precedents for other regional leaders to make similar demands whenever they face setbacks. He can attempt to downplay the significance of the strike and insist that Kadyrov accept losses as part of the price of war, risking that. Kadyrov responds by reducing his commitment or even withdrawing Chechen forces from some operations. None of these options are attractive, and all of them reveal how Ukrainian strategy has evolved beyond simply inflicting military damage to creating political problems within Russian leadership. By striking targets that hurt Putin's key allies, Ukraine forces wedges between the president and the coalition that supports him, by demonstrating that no one in Putin's inner circle can consider themselves safe from Ukrainian reach. The strikes create anxiety and recriminations that degrade trust and coordination, and by hitting targets whose political significance exceeds their military value, Ukrainian planners maximize the leverage they extract from limited strike capabilities. The Chechen facility represented a perfect target from this perspective, valuable enough to matter, but vulnerable enough to be hit, and connected to an ally whose loyalty Putin cannot afford to lose. And beyond the immediate political crisis, the strike creates operational challenges for Russian military planning. Chechen forces have played disproportionate roles in some of the most difficult and brutal fighting in Ukraine. They have been deployed to secure areas where other Russian units failed. They have conducted operations that require particular ruthlessness or that involve high casualties. They have served as blocking forces that prevent retreats and that execute soldiers who abandon positions. And Russian commanders depend on Kadyrov forces for missions where absolute reliability and willingness to accept losses are essential. Any reduction in the availability or effectiveness of Chechen fighters creates gaps in Russian military capabilities that cannot easily be filled by other units. The facility that was destroyed provided critical support infrastructure for maintaining Chechen forces in combat. With that facility damaged or destroyed, Russian logistics planners must develop alternative systems for training, equipping, and rotating Kadyrov fighters, a process that takes time, diverts resources from other priorities, and may not achieve the same levels of effectiveness as the original arrangements. Units currently deployed in Ukraine may face extended rotations if replacement forces cannot be prepared and deployed on schedule. Operations may need to be postponed or cancelled if Chechen forces cannot participate as planned, and the overall tempo and effectiveness of Russian military operations decline when key units face logistics and support challenges that prevent them from operating at full capability. Russian air defense planners now confront uncomfortable questions about how to protect area facilities from Ukrainian strikes. The The systems currently deployed apparently failed to prevent this attack, and do they need more advanced systems with better performance? Do they need greater numbers to provide redundant coverage? Do they need different positioning or integration to detect and engage threats more effectively? Or do Ukrainian capabilities simply exceed what Russian air defenses can reliably counter? Each of these possibilities suggests different responses, and Russian military leadership may not have clear consensus about which approach to prioritize. While they debate, Ukrainian forces continue improving their strike capabilities and identifying additional targets whose destruction would create valuable military or political effects. The broader Russian military must also consider what this strike means for the security of their own area installations. If Ukrainian forces can hit targets in Chechnya, they can potentially strike facilities anywhere in Western Russia. Command posts, training centers, ammunition depots, logistics hubs, and other critical infrastructure all face increased risk, and Russian military planners must now allocate resources to defending targets they previously considered secure, spreading already limited air defense systems even thinner across more potential target areas. This creates a dilemma where protecting everything adequately becomes impossible, forcing difficult decisions about which facilities receive priority defensive coverage and which must accept risk. Ukrainian intelligence will work to identify these priorities and target the facilities that receive less protection. Ukrainian strategy has evolved throughout this war, from initial survival against overwhelming Russian aggression to organized defense that prevented the fall of Kiev, to counteroffensive operations that liberated significant territory, to the current phase that combines active defense with precision strikes against Russian capabilities and political cohesion. The attack on Chechen facilities represents the latest evolution in this strategy, demonstrating that Ukraine can now reach targets deep in Russian territory and create effects that resonate far beyond immediate battle damage. This capability transforms the strategic calculus that Russian leaders must employ when deciding how to prosecute this war and when to consider negotiated settlements.